Hey everyone, welcome to Crushing Classical, redefining a thriving classical music career. I'm Tracy Friedlander, and on the show today we have Natalie Lynn, founder of the Houston-based conductorless ensemble called Kinetic. On the show, we talk about her educational path in music and how her expectation of the direction of her career changed unexpectedly. We discuss the dynamics of a conductorless ensemble and what it does for the musicians to play and work without a conductor. She also shares the challenges that she faced to create this ensemble and the realization that she had that was holding her back from starting. Before we begin, a couple of things. Please join the conversation at facebook.com/crushingclassical, as well as Crushing Classical on Instagram. If you love our content, it would mean the world to us for you to comment and share with all your classical musician friends and colleagues. I'd like to thank Fix Music for being a sponsor of Crushing Classical Podcast. FixMusic.com is your online resource for affordable, high-quality sheet music. Fix also offers unique buying options for individuals, teachers, and schools. Whether you have a large private teaching studio or you run a music program, Fix has a solution for you. Contact them through their website for more information. Fix offers Priority and Priority Express shipping at super affordable rates, meaning they do not pad their shipping rates to make more money. If you need sheet music fast, Fix will expedite it to you as inexpensively as possible. Also, remember to use the discount code CRUSH and get 10% off your order. Let's get started. Hi, Natalie. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. So I wanted to have you on today to talk to us about your ensemble that you started, Kinetic, right?
Yeah,
It's
that's right.
so incredible. I mean, people start ensembles now, and I just a few years ago when I was coming up, nobody thought of starting an ensemble or their own chamber music group or anything. So how did you, well, first of all, I hear you have an accent, so tell me a little bit about where you're from.
Yeah, I guess that deserves explanation. So I'm originally from New Zealand. I was born and raised there, and then 2007 I came over to the States to study. So I've been here ever since.
Okay, so where are you right now?
Right now I'm in Houston, Texas.
Okay, and you go to Rice?
Yes.
So did you go straight there from New Zealand, or did you?
I'm sort of this is my second time living in Houston. So I started off at the University of Houston, which is the state school here. And then after a couple of years, I went up to Cleveland Institute of Music, finished my bachelor's there, got my master's, and then just ended up back in Houston. I applied for the doctoral program, and my teacher who I was studying with at CIM happened to relocate to Rice. So I just followed him down here.
That's great.
Yeah, so I guess I've lived most of my time in America in Houston, so it's sort of become my second home.
So tell me is there any culture shock involved in going from New Zealand to Texas?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there is already quite a big difference between American culture and New Zealand culture, even though it's the same language.
Yeah.
But like Texas culture can be pretty specific as well.
Yeah.
So I remember like driving from the airport, like I just landed, and driving to campus, and I've never seen so many flags in my life, like American flags, but also like next to almost every American flag is also a Texas flag. I'm like, oh my gosh, wow. It's like a different level of patriotism.
I know. And you picked the one state that's going to be over the top.
Yeah, for sure.
That. So that's really funny. Can you think of any other examples of, major culture shock?
Well, I guess, like the accent is a little bit of a problem because not many people have encountered a New Zealand accent before. So ordering food was really difficult. Like even at a Subway, and like, like I would call something, one word and it's not recognized here, like red peppers. In New Zealand, we call them capsicums. So I'm up there at Subway trying to, put capsicums on my, sandwich, and they're just like not having it. Yeah.
They're like, what's that? I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about your career path. I know that you started your group, but had you originally set out as your violinist to set out for an orchestra job or what, because that's the typical path. So I'm wondering if you always intended on creating an ensemble or did you have another path that you were intended on doing?
Yeah, I didn't really plan on doing this. It's sort of, I mean, once I had the idea, for sure, I planned it out. But
Yeah.
yeah, going into my studies in America, I certainly wasn't thinking about creating my own ensemble.
Hmm.
I also wasn't super like motivated to get an orchestra job either.
Hmm.
I think, yeah, like after my master's at CIM, sort of took a year off to explore some various options because I didn't know what I wanted to do next. So,
Hmm.
I applied for a couple of doctorate programs, an artist diploma. I started subbing, or I got a job in a regional orchestra in the Cleveland, Ohio area. And then I took one professional orchestra job. So I was just exploring all options and just
Hmm.
seeing if anything stuck. Oh, and then at the same time, I started teaching. So I got a Suzuki certification.
Right. That sounds like a
Um,
typical path. Like after school, right? Everyone sort of is like, well, it's time to audition. Do I feel ready? Do I really want this? Teaching can make money, so I should do that. And
sure,
you're just
yeah.
kind of feeling things out. So that makes sense. And
Yeah, and I'm totally glad I took that year to do that because the original plan was just to jump straight into a doctorate program. Like that's what I thought I wanted.
mhm.
But when the time came, I just realized, oh my gosh, I'm completely not ready. Masters is so short. And yeah, if anyone's listening and is wondering, oh, should I do a doctorate? Like, it's a really big decision. So it should be something not that you don't just fall into. So,
Right.
so in the end, I took that year and then I, at the end, well, actually, yeah, halfway through, I decided, yeah, actually, I do want to go for that doctorate. So I've always sort of been an academic at heart.
Right.
And so I applied for one program. I only applied to Rice and I figured, okay, if I don't get in, then, I'll stay put in Cleveland.
Mhm.
But I got in and then went, yeah, after that, I really thought I was on an academic track.
Towards
But
towards a professorship somewhere or something
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yes, I was thinking, yeah, I really do enjoy teaching. I love theory. I love performing, of course, but this is, this doctoral training that I'm getting is a new set of skills apart from performing, which I already, sort of know how to do.
Hmm.
So that's the track that I thought I was getting myself into. And then it's sort of interesting because it's really at Rice during my doctorate where the idea of kinetic came around, which was really unexpected because I really thought I was going to be focusing on, building up my resume so that I could get a
Yeah.
college teaching job. And
Something safe and secure and
yeah,
all that.
although I don't know if that's super secure either, but yeah,
Right.
definitely like a focus in like a straight line.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was interesting because coming to Rice actually, instead of like narrowing my focus towards one thing, like teaching, it actually broadened things even more.
Mm.
Um, which is interesting. And I think that a lot of my colleagues in the doctoral program also found that. Like I came here expecting that everybody would also be like, yeah, by the time I finish this degree, I'm going to get a teaching job. That's what I want.
Hmm.
But I realized that that was really not the case. There were some people that were still doing competitions, some people auditioning for orchestras, some people really interested in teaching. Um, yeah, and then I found this sort of passion for this ensemble that I wanted to start, and that was sort of yeah, totally unexpected, but yeah, that's sort of
So how did you come up with the idea? And I mean, what was your thinking behind, I'm going to start a group? I know you said that you got the idea there, but what made you take action on that?
Yeah, so there were a series of, I guess, events that happened. Well, first of all, my background, I guess, when I was growing up in New Zealand, I would say um, what New Zealand is best at is chamber music, as opposed to like orchestra or band or anything. In fact, we don't really have band programs very much. But I had a lot of chamber music experience when I was growing up in high school, and barely any orchestra experience. So I came to college, like the first thing we played in our student orchestra was Beethoven Eroica, and I'd never heard it before. And I was like, it was just really a huge shock, like, wow, this is all this great repertoire. But anyway, so I had a lot of chamber music experience, and also in high school was sort of encouraged to lead our string orchestra without a conductor. So our conductor sort of took a sabbatical that year and just left me in charge. So I was like thrown into it. And at the time, I was 17, and I was thinking like, I really love this. I would love to do this one day. And just put it on the shelf. It's like something that you say when you're young, like, when I'm older, this is what I want to do. Yeah. So then, many, many years later, I'm at Rice, and we were assigned actually through the school orchestra program, a conductorless project. And I hadn't done a conductorless project since high school. So a lot of years later, and I was assigned to be concertmaster, and there was barely any supervision in this project because our music director was out of town in New York doing a tour there. So we were sort of just left to our own devices. And I was handed the scores at the beginning of the first rehearsal, and
wow.
And so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna, really get into this and study the scores and engage with my colleagues. And it turned out to be a really rewarding experience. I think with a project like Conductorless, and I'll probably talk about this later, but it's really what you put into it. Like you can certainly just show up and play the music, and it's like the same as if you had a conductor in front of you.
Right,
or
that you were ignoring.
Yeah, I suppose. But it can also be a really rewarding experience where you take a lot of ownership of the music that you're making. And I found my colleagues really responding really positively. And it's always a challenge because, there's so many things you have to work out and figure out with playing together and musical decisions and things. But anyway, after the end of that project, there were some colleagues in that orchestra, and there was some talk like, "Oh, that was a really positive experience. Let's try to do that again." And people are always saying things like that, like, "Oh, that's cool. Oh, we should,"
especially right after, right?
Yeah, we should do this. Like, this is a good idea. And there's lots of good ideas out there, which is awesome. And I think what the difference was that we didn't just let it sit as a good idea. Like, sometime in the future, that would be cool. So I was talking to a couple of professors, and I got to say that the professors at Rice are awesome and so supportive. So I remember talking to a trumpet professor, and who had come to the concert and really loved it. And I said, it's my dream to start a conductorless orchestra. And this is Barbara Butler. I was talking to her. She's awesome. And she said, well, Natalie, like, you don't just sit around and wait for someone else to assign you a project. Like, if you want to do this, you just got to do it.
Yeah.
Like, don't sit around and wait. And and then there was another professor that basically said the same thing. So after that, I thought, okay, I'm just going to do it. And those, talking to those professors and mentors is what really gave me the push to just go for it and try it out.
Yeah, because it's easy to say, oh, that's something I'll do in the future. But and this is what we talk about a lot, is that this stuff happens in conversation. Once you're talking to people about it and you get encouraged, and then you keep talking about it, because a conversation can go away if you think, like after the project was over originally and everyone's like, yeah, that was awesome, and then like 2-3 days goes by and a week goes by, and then people kind of forget because they're doing life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's always really fun coming up with crazy ideas and just letting your imagination go wild. And the hard part is just like buckling down and actually taking the logistical steps to making it
Yes,
happen. And that
logistical
stuff
stuff.
isn't that fun. So
Exactly.
I totally understand why, some really awesome ideas don't necessarily end up happening, or people give up because it's just hard work.
Yeah. So when you first started, did you get the same people that you had played with on that original project, or did you start from scratch, or how did that work, finding the people?
Yeah, so I did start with a few of the people that showed a lot of interest,
Hmm.
and we were bouncing ideas together. The original project that we did at school was a full chamber orchestra, so winds and brass and
Mm.
everything. And I decided that I wanted it to be just string orchestra. I guess for different reasons, but for me, that's just where I feel most comfortable. And I think there's some fantastic repertoire that doesn't get played a lot for string
Hmm.
orchestra. But I sort of, I just asked my friends at first, and looking back, like the college or conservatory setting was the perfect place to start this,
Hmm.
because there were so many awesome musicians willing to do a crazy project.
Yeah.
So I asked my friends, and I was particularly looking for people that I thought had strong chamber music skills.
Hmm.
And I guess that's sort of ambiguous. Like, what does it look like to have chamber music skills? But I guess, like people that I thought would be receptive during rehearsals for conversation and collaboration, and sort of have an open mind.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it was definitely like trial and error a little bit, like, okay, who might be a good fit for this, who is even interested in something like this. And we started from there. We started with 18 musicians. And gosh, the first project that we did was it was challenging. It was tricky. There were some bad times and good times.
Really? Like, what were some of the bad times? Not to focus on the negative, but like, what were some standout things that were really hard?
Well, I think the hardest thing, and which is still true now, is time constraints,
Hmm.
because musicians are always really busy with various projects going on.
Yeah.
And with a conductorless project, it really needs time,
Hmm.
more than a traditional orchestra, because part of the process is exploration of ideas and experimentation. And so I think it was difficult, like I knowing what the ideal concept was, but realistically, like not actually having that amount of like abundant time to achieve all those things. So that was difficult. It's
Hmm.
like we had really difficult repertoire, and we did have a lot of time, but just not enough. So I think when people are under time constraints or like under pressure, that's when sort of stress reveals itself a little bit.
Right.
So that was hard, and I think also just doing a conductorless project for the first time, like not having any precedent for how this actually works, like how are we actually going to run a rehearsal,
Hmm.
like what are the expectations and things. So
Yeah. How do you know?
definitely,
Because usually there's someone at the front telling you what's happening next. I mean, did
yeah.
you take over that role sort of as concert master? Like, did you kind of lead it?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like the first project, we didn't know. I didn't know what my role was going to be, because I am up there in the quote unquote concert master chair, or we stand. So yeah.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if how much I was supposed to lead or how much I was supposed to shut up and let people talk. So it was really a huge experiment. And I guess what we've found is that, every project we've built upon the previous one and sort of been able to like fine tune and figure out, okay, this kind of leadership structure works, and this amount of conversation and collaboration works. And so we're still young. We're about to start our third season. So I would say still every concert that we do is an opportunity to keep like fine tuning and perfecting this model that we're looking for with playing Conductorless and collaborating.
And have you been able to keep basically the same personnel so that you can continue to grow that together, or?
Yeah, that's also a challenge. We have been able to keep some personnel, and there's sort of like a group of us who have played every single project since we started. It's difficult because people are always doing different projects, and like, let's be real, like people want to win jobs. So it's like we keep losing players to jobs, which is like great because I want our musicians to be employed. That's really awesome. But it is difficult being a young ensemble in terms of age, like the age of our players, because they're not necessarily sure if they're going to stay in Houston long term. And everyone has different ambitions to go to different places or go to grad school, or get into an orchestra. So yeah, we have had a little bit of changes in personnel, inevitably, but I think I used to be more stressed out about this. But now I'm a little more comfortable, just because, we've been around for a little while, and we've been able to establish this like quote unquote conductorless model, like, or the kinetic model. Like, this is sort of how we operate, and this is sort of our structure in rehearsals. So when we add a new player, I think it's pretty easy for them to figure out quickly, like, okay, this is how it works, and this is how I can, just jump on in and be a part of this ensemble. And it doesn't feel, too different from concert to concert if the personnel is slightly different.
Right. And it's structured now because exactly how you set it up for rehearsals and concerts. So they walk in, this is what we're doing. It's already decided. Unlike when you first started, you were probably feeling out schedules and trying to figure out what everyone can do.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now it's like it's established. So that makes it a little easier. So are you able to pay your players now?
Yes, a little bit. Yeah. That's always a huge challenge. But and of course, when we started out, it was all volunteer. In fact, the first two projects that we did on the campus of Rice University, and it just counted towards my degree, actually. Like the first one was my chamber music recital, which was a bit of a stretch because there was 18 people on there. But yeah, those ones were just, I guess, could be considered student projects. And then we did our first season, where everyone still continued to volunteer for the whole year, which was incredible, I thought. But it was never my goal to have it stay a volunteer only project. Like, I just knew that wasn't sustainable, and it wasn't the vision that I had.
So what is your vision? Is your vision to tell me more about what you mean by that? Like, do you know what your ultimate vision is?
I guess for me, I do want it to be a paid and like competitively paid freelance gig. For people who live in the Houston area, or even people who don't live in the Houston area, who can come back and play in it.
Yeah.
For me, part of the larger vision, if I sort of like step back a little bit, is that I think it's really important for us to be a part of the Houston music scene. And I say like specifically Houston because we've sort of like invested in the city as our home base. Like we're not a touring orchestra. We're not trying to make it in New York or anything like that, but we're trying to enrich the cultural landscape here. And I think part of that is paying our musicians so that it's like a professional gig. It's not just like a student project or something like that, but it's a professional gig that's part of the music scene. And like enriching the community, but also enriching our musicians by, looking after them and making sure that they can do what they love and also pay their bills.
Yes, I know. That's always the challenge.
Yeah, so that's the goal. We're, baby steps. We did pay our musicians. I mean, I called it an honorarium this past season, just because it's like for the amount of work that they're doing, it's it's stupid. Like they deserve so much more. And because I'm a musician myself, like I'm not just an administrator, like I know that, and I'm always trying to like advocate for them and make sure that they're looked after.
Yeah.
And just hopefully from year to year, we can just keep pushing it up and keep growing our budget.
Are you trying to raise money? Is that how you're doing it? So did you create a nonprofit for it?
Yep, we created a nonprofit. We actually started out as just a fiscally sponsored project. So if anyone's listening and is interested in how this works, so there are sort of nonprofits that can help you. Like if you're not a nonprofit, they can help you out. We went through an organization called Fractured Atlas, and they were really awesome. So before we were a nonprofit, we sort of were umbrellaed by them for almost a year. And then after that, we decided, okay, we want to become our own nonprofit. So that happened about over a year ago now. Yeah, so we're still super young as a nonprofit organization, but it was pretty clear that that's what we wanted to do, to turn into a nonprofit. And it was also pretty clear that we weren't going to be able to make it without fundraising. Yeah. And that's just the reality of like the art world, I think. Art organizations is that your main source of income is either fundraising or grants. And for us, since we're so young at the moment, we're not eligible for a lot of grants. So it's almost like all fundraising is how we support ourselves, which is scary. I mean, it's a strange concept, especially for people in the for-profit world, where it's like, oh, I tell them like, I've created an organization, and with for-profits, like the number one goal is like make as much money as possible. And for us, our goal is like make the best music. And which is a really strange thing for people who aren't in the nonprofit world to realize, like, oh, actually we've created an organization that can't support itself without the support of the public. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I know. It's just the way that it is with nonprofits, check out it's really interesting talk we had on nonprofits on this podcast. It was called the Fireside Chat number 9. This woman who's a she's a nonprofit, she's really smart about nonprofits. She's from Canada, and we had her on to talk about nonprofits. So if you're interested, I
will check it out.
She had some really great things to say. And of course, she was coming from a place where, the nonprofit is pretty established, but still there's a whole culture that goes with nonprofit. And she explains a lot about that on that episode. So It's really interesting. But it's hard. It's hard, especially because you've been a violinist up until now. So
Yeah.
raising money, you have to learn sort of a sales pitch and
Yeah, it was really strange um to assume this different role of like development, I don't know, administrator or something like that. And
yeah.
I have to admit, like when I started Kinetic, I guess I didn't know what I was getting myself into in
Hmm.
terms of like how much work it was going to be. Like you
Right.
start off just with an idea like, oh, I just want to play music with my friends.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, like before you know it, you're like writing fundraising letters and making a website and
Yeah.
scheduling and so yeah, it's been a huge learning curve.
Was there ever a
Um,
moment that you were like, forget it, I'm quitting. All this work isn't worth it?
yeah, many times.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot, but I think whenever we do actually like come down to do a project and perform,
Hmm.
it feels totally worth it. Um, yeah, it's like, okay, I remember why I'm doing this. It's because I love to do this and
Right.
the musicians love it and the audience loves it. Yeah.
Yeah. So while we're talking about money, it's a tough thing for musicians, and I wanted to know a little bit about do you obviously you probably at this point can't really pay yourself yet for all the work you do, or
Mm.
is it being worked out, or how do you support yourself?
Yeah. Actually, my board is always on my case about this because I wasn't paying myself this past year. This past year was the first time we paid musicians, and I
Hmm.
just made the decision not to pay myself. Which I've been told is quite common with founders of nonprofits. It's like, it's because you see all the numbers coming in or the numbers not coming in. And it's
Hmm.
like writing yourself a check is like, you just don't feel like, you feel like, oh, this paycheck could go towards like office supplies or,
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so my board has encouraged me like, okay, this year you're a musician as well, just like if all the other musicians in the ensemble. So yes, like start paying yourself and doing that. But it's certainly, yeah, it's certainly not the only thing I do, which, yeah, makes my life quite varied. Or I guess my career quite varied. And I kind of like it like that. So I do teach. I have a, teaching studio and then, just gigs that come up,
Hmm.
performing gigs that come up in town or out of town, I'll take. Yeah, so it's just an assortment. And I suppose this is what a freelance life looks like. Yeah.
Yeah. So how has that changed the way you look at your gigs now that you have something? Because I know you were freelancing a little bit in Ohio. Has it made you happier about gigs knowing that you have your own project that you work on as well?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting because I think it's hard being a freelance musician because you don't always love the gigs that you have to take.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like it really wears on your soul. Like
Yes.
you're doing a gig or you're doing a wedding or background music or something and you're like,
Uh-huh.
"Ah, man, I just don't want to be here."
Yeah.
And so you start just showing up because you're getting paid for it. And I think that's so common. And it's unfortunate because it's like, music is clearly what we love. Otherwise we wouldn't be doing it. But then it becomes something that we don't love. And it's just like we're just supporting ourselves. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's tricky. In fact, we have had a couple of, musicians play with us that, are pretty active freelancers and have been out of school for quite a while. And, they've always come up to me after playing a kinetic concert and said like, thank you. That was really rewarding and really different from other gigs.
Oh, cool.
Because it's like this sort of ironic situation. Like people aren't there for the money because we're not
Yeah.
paying them a lot. It's just like a
Yeah.
very small honorarium. Like people are showing up because they want to be there and they believe in the project.
Mm-hmm.
And for them, like getting a small honorarium is like a bonus.
Yeah.
So it's interesting talking to these freelance musicians and saying like, yeah, it does get hard because people do get jaded out there in the
Mm-hmm.
freelance world and they get tired. Um, so yeah, it's a lot of things to figure out. I think when I was freelancing in Ohio, I wasn't sure. It was like good experience, but I wasn't sure if that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I certainly didn't think I wanted to stay doing those particular gigs
Yeah.
for a long period of time. And I think with Kinetic starting that was sort of just me figuring out like what is meaningful music making to me and
Mm-hmm.
is it possible to get paid doing what you love? Maybe eventually, you
I
know.
think so. I just think it's one of those long game things, whenever you start an ensemble that you'll eventually get there, but takes a long time. I've talked to several people on this podcast about it and like the group Project Trio, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know about them, but
I don't think I've heard
um
of them.
they've been doing it for I think going on their 11th season and now they support themselves fully. But they also do a lot of other things, within their performances. They do educational things as well. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you guys do stuff like that. Do you do educational
Yeah,
outreach type things?
we do. I would love to do more actually. We do a lot of sort of chamber music oriented education. So working
Mm-hmm.
with like middle school orchestras and getting them to sort of move and it's like letting them see, okay, what's it like if we don't have a conductor? Like what do you have to
Yeah.
do to connect with each other? And we had a pretty crazy project last season where we commissioned a piece for a side by side project. So the piece was commissioned and then we had like our stand partner was a middle school student or a high school
Oh.
student. And so they were sort of like, we called it project, what do we call it? Kinetic immersion. So it's like they were just
Mm-hmm.
dropped into the ensemble and had to, just, by experience, see what it was like to work in a conductorless ensemble. Yeah. So yeah, we do
That's cool.
some outreach. And would be great to do more. That's sort of a baby program at the moment, the outreach
That's
program.
I love it. And especially because I think the first time I experienced Conductorless, besides a small chamber group, was so much further into my professional career. And maybe it was just someone conducting from the piano or something like that. I don't know if I've ever actually played with an orchestra that was only just being conducted or, led by the concertmaster. So yeah, it's great that they get to experience that at such a young age. So it's a great idea.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah. So on my podcast, I always ask my guests about their defining moment that I call the fuck this moment, where you've
Hmm.
where you've been, trucking along in a comfort zone or whatever, but maybe not so happy with what you're doing, and you decide to just take the plunge. And usually there's, go into an unknown region. And usually there's, like a moment where you have that revelation or realization. Can you think of a moment like that in your career where you did that? I'm sure it might be related to kinetic or might not be, but if you had that.
That's a tough question. I'm not actually sure I have had like a fuck this moment. Um, maybe small ones. Like I think the one that I mentioned earlier when I was talking to Barbara Butler and she said like, Natalie, just go for it. I think
Yeah.
that was for sure a moment where I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm just gonna do it. And like, this is what I've always loved and I'm just gonna do it. So yeah, for sure that was a very memorable moment for me.
Yeah.
Um, I guess reaching back further than that, I actually decided very late that I wanted to pursue music as a career.
Mm.
Um, I decided, yeah, halfway through my last year of high school was when I decided, yeah, for sure, I want to do music. And before that, I was taking sciences, and I thought I was going to do pre-med and everything.
Mm.
But yeah, I it was a summer music festival that I went to in Italy, and it was my first overseas experience really with music. Before that, I was just growing up in New Zealand, in the
Yeah.
corner of the world. So for sure, when I went to Italy and I was around young people my age, musicians, and I was around professors, and I realized like, oh, actually, because when you're from New Zealand or a small country, you don't actually know how you measure up with the rest of the world, and you
Right.
just sort of assume that every, everyone else is more advanced and have more resources and everything.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, when I went there and met American students, European students, and I realized actually, like, yeah, this is something that I could definitely see myself doing, and
Mm.
yeah, I want to do this. And so yeah, like 6 months later, I was in America. It was pretty nuts.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big take the plunge moment because coming all the way to America from New Zealand, that's not a short trip. Did
No, it's
what
not.
did your parents say when you decided?
I'm actually surprised they let me come, because it was such a last minute decision. I how did yeah, it was like June that I went to that music festival, and in New Zealand, high school ends in December.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it goes from February through to December. And yeah, I was in Italy. I had met some professors and was recommended University of Houston. Um, and they told me they would take me for the spring semester. So, like in 6 months' time. So I remember coming home from that festival and going to my career counselor at school and saying, I want to go to America. And she's like, okay, well, there's this thing called SATs and you got to take that like
Oh.
ASAP. And I just didn't know anything. I was like, okay, great, whatever it takes. Took the SATs, and I think yeah, got the score like something like 3 weeks before I um, decided I would move to America.
Wow. So you were
Yeah, so
nervous
it's sort of just
waiting, like you bet this better come in the mail.
yeah. Like I put in my application, and then my SAT scores came out, and
Wow.
that was fine. And yeah, so I still can't believe I really did that. Like it just happened so fast, and then and I think at the time I was really ready to leave New Zealand. People always ask me why I left New Zealand. It's like, why would you ever leave such a beautiful country? Um, but I think for what I wanted to do with music, it was sort of, as soon as I realized that I wanted to do music, it was like a given that I would leave and yeah, try to study in America or at least somewhere abroad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's funny. So you just knew. It was just like as soon as you realized it was music for you, you knew you were going to leave.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Do you ever think you'll go back?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
I love it there. It's beautiful for anyone
Yeah.
thinking about visiting. Yeah, you should totally do it. Um, and I always, it's always been another dream of mine to go back and to really be involved in that music scene because it is such a small country
Hmm.
and there's so much talent coming for such a small country. There's so much talent coming out of it, whether
Right.
it's like in music or sport or art, design. So I'm really proud to be a New Zealander, and I think, um, yeah, I think it is my obligation to go back and to sort of inspire the next generation or whatever, or at least be part of the music scene in some aspect. So yeah, I do think about it all the time. It's funny because I have like such a strong sense of like home in
Hmm.
both Houston and in New Zealand. And
Really?
they're like such different, completely different scenes. And
Yeah.
um, yeah, so
Well, that might lead to my next question. What is your next big goal in your career?
um, I'm not really sure. I I think right now because kinetics on a certain track
Hmm.
of just, developing and growing. Yeah, I guess there is like the long-term vision of like, yeah, 5 years from now, we want to be like this.
Yeah.
But for now, it's just like, okay, tomorrow, this is what I'm gonna do and then the next day. And so it's sort of like pretty pragmatic, actually. Like, this is what I want to do so that in a year or in 5 years, we can reach this point. Um,
Like what point?
I guess, I guess I just want us to be like a established professional ensemble,
Hmm.
with the funding we need to,
Yeah.
competitively support our musicians. Um, yeah, just sort of keep doing what we're doing, but, keep pushing ourselves, more and more to, you know, get the best artistic product possible.
And maybe a tour to New Zealand is in your future.
Oh, I would love, I mean, I've thought about that many times, like, oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah, that might be a great way to raise money. People from New Zealand who want to see you back here, like, you know,
Yeah.
our young Natalie went off into the sunset, to
Yeah.
America, and then you created an ensemble, and then you come back for a homecoming with your group. That'd be cool.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have three more questions for you. What is one habit or behavior that you've developed that has made the most difference in your career so far?
Um, I think actually it's this probably sounds bad, but I think it's a little bit of stubbornness, um, that has served me well. Or maybe persistence is a better word.
Yeah.
I see that like, not just in the music field, but, I like to watch like, Chef's Table on Netflix and sort of all those other documentaries
Yeah.
where they feature like someone who's been really successful in their field. And they all have this sort of stubbornness, I think, like, this is what I know I want. And I'm just going to
Mm,
like, it doesn't matter if, you know, people think differently about it, but this is what I really believe in. And I'm just going to like keep working on
yeah.
it. I think for me, yeah, I think I just, in terms of like practically, yeah, practically making things happen, like the little details that you need to put on a concert or put on a season. I think, yeah, just being really persistent and stubborn and a little bit obsessive, like, okay, like all these things need to be in place and just, continuing to work out all the details to make the vision a reality. Yeah,
It's one of
that's really
those,
helped.
yeah, it's like one of those traits that some people think is a bad quality, but not in this situation. It's not a bad quality at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess so. Yeah,
Yeah. Stubborn for good.
yeah. Hmm.
So, who in the classical world inspires you?
Uh, well, I actually, I mean, we're not the first conductorless orchestra in the world. There's obviously like, others before us, and I really look up to them and what they've done. Um, so of course, Orpheus, which was probably the first conductorless orchestra. I'm not sure.
Hmm.
Um, and then, a Far Cry in Boston.
Okay.
I actually visited them last summer just to sort of shadow some rehearsals and things. And I really respect what they've done. And it's very inspiring to know, like, okay, here's a group that started 10 years ago and this is where they are now.
Hmm.
And maybe in 10 years we can also be there, sort of thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I mean, so many ensembles and so many sort of individuals that are like doing really bold, um, sort of like risk taking things.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I love that you went and watched them because it's so great that you just want to keep learning and bringing
yeah, for
back
sure.
ideas.
I mean, I think that's the whole sort of um, like the whole idea of Conductorless is that you're always learning from your colleagues, and
Mhm.
you don't think you have like the absolute answer, or that you're right all the time. So
Right.
I think, yeah, it's only natural that that I'm sort of continuing to learn from other organizations and ensembles. And it's interesting because so I watched them, and then I also went up and watched East Coast Chamber Orchestra in New York, who are also incredible. Like I love what they're doing. Um, and they were both really supportive of having me, and really, really welcoming. Like you think there's a lot of sort of cutthroat
Hmm.
competition out there, which I'm sure is true. Like it's definitely true as well. But it's interesting that there's like, I think sort of an emerging like community of conductorless uh, organizations, or maybe even just like startup organizations, because
Yeah.
there's so many things starting up right now, like amongst my friends, starting music festivals and things. So there's sort of like a community of entrepreneurs in music, and I think it's great to
Yeah,
see them.
I think you're right. I think it's leading to a more of a community and more a collaboration possibly because when everyone's out to get a job and everyone's competing against each other for that last seat in the, whatever orchestra, it's an air and a just a general vibe of competition and cutthroat, like you said. But this is everyone's creating something unique and different, and there's no reason not to support each other and learn from each other. And it seems so much more positive, and it's really creating a different kind of setting in the classical world. And I have to say, who in the classical world inspires me is people like you who are doing stuff like this. I think it's incredibly inspiring. So that's
Mm.
awesome.
Cool, thank you. Yeah.
So what would you like to promote? I know you have an upcoming season. So what is it that's coming for you that you'd like people to know about?
Well, sure. So Kinetic is starting our third season, 2017-18 season. If you want to check out the details, it's at www.kineticensemble.org. Yeah, we're just really excited. We're playing variety of repertoire. Usually we play repertoire that doesn't get played a lot. That's sort of my niche, is sort of discovering stuff that's awesome that needs to be heard. um, so we're doing Bartok Divertimento on our first concert. The second concert, we're commissioning a piece by one of our violinists, actually, who's also a composer, John Carlo Latta, who's writing a piece inspired by Grosse Fuge by Beethoven. We're going to be doing some Rautavaara, and then my personal favorite is Benjamin Britten. And then our last concert, we're going to do Britten's Serenade for tenor horn and strings.
Oh, great.
So yeah, love that piece.
Yeah, that's a great piece. Exciting. Well, I'll make sure that I put your social media and your website in the show notes so people can, click those links and check you guys out and like you on
Awesome.
Facebook and everything else.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
thanks for being on today, Natalie. I really appreciate it. And if you are enjoying Crushing Classical, please write a review on iTunes and come join the conversation on Facebook and Instagram at Crushing Classical. And thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.